Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, how are you doing this week? You good?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's officially summertime in the UK. I have got sunburn. Happy days.
Yeah, it's officially an English summer. We were talking about how you've been burnt and then how it's 14 days of rain in coming up for us. But yes, a beautiful British summer is here. And as always, we have an awesome episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into lessons. Today, we're going to be learning your lessons. With Secrets of Strixhaven being released and also with the Avatar set from last year, we've got a bunch of cool new lessons, and we've been toying with how we can include them in our cubes. Before we get into that main topic, as a reminder, there will be timecodes and a card gallery down in the show notes below if you want to see the cards that we're talking about or jump around to any of our specific ideas or topics for today. While you're down there, please consider giving the podcast a thumbs up or a like. Greatly helps us out. But I think let's just start at the top here. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on lessons. But before we do that, James, what is a lesson?
Yeah, so a lesson is basically just a subtype of instant or sorcery. It doesn't really mean anything on its own. Just being a lesson doesn't give it any intrinsic properties. But there are a bunch of other cards that care about lessons. So, yeah, lessons, for example, we've got Environmental Sciences, one of the classics, 2 colorless mana for a sorcery lesson, search library for the basic, put it into your hand, gain 2 life. Not super exciting on its own, but when it really gets interesting is when the way lessons combine with the learn mechanic. So learn was a mechanic which we first saw in original Strixhaven, and learn says you may reveal a lesson card you own from outside the game, put it into your hand, or you can discard a card to draw a card. So it showed up on a bunch of cards in original Strixhaven and was a really, really sweet draft archetype, or drafting mechanic, actually, in that set. It lets you sort of build this wish board, effectively, of like a little toolbox of effects that you're going to get access to from your main deck, but that live in your sideboard. And it's cool that it's like a little sub-game you're playing throughout the draft, right? It's sending you on a little mission that you want to get a nice little selection of stuff to get from your sideboard. And obviously, the more good lessons you get to put in your sideboard, the more powerful the learn cards become. So some examples of cards that have learn on them, like Ingenious Inspiration is a pretty good one. This is 2 in a red, deal 320 target, learn. So if that's just deal 3 rummage, because you don't have any lessons in your sideboard, fine, but not all that exciting. But if you have, say, 1 or 2 decent lessons, then yeah, you're starting to get it pretty good there. It's maybe sort of about on the level of deal 3, draw a card. That's pretty good for 3 mana. But in the really good case where you really get there, you've got like a selection of 5 or 6 different lessons, which are all good in different scenarios. So this becomes almost like a little mini tutor attached to your 3 mana deal 3. Then the card's really powerful, right? And so you're drafting towards having that set of really powerful that optionality on your learn cards later in game. And obviously, the more lessons you get, the more you want to pick up more learn cards. The more learn cards you get, the more you want to pick up more lessons for your sideboards. You can have access to them more often. So it really dovetails really nicely.
Yeah, I thought lessons were really fun. It was definitely one of the main highlights of the first Strixhaven set. Like those and the Mystical Archives really kind of made a very cool draft environment. And yeah, as we said, kind of with the addition of some new lessons, and that's actually some quite powerful lessons, if we're honest, from some of the recent sets. Definitely one reason why we wanted to look at it in a bit more detail today.
Yeah, sure. Honestly, I've been sort of thinking about how you could get learn lesson to work in Cube ever since it was a thing in Strixhaven. I think it probably wasn't there just with original Strixhaven, because we'll get onto them. The lessons weren't super strong, but with the new options we've got in Secrets of Strixhaven and Avatar gave us tons of great ones. There's some pretty interesting stuff there, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and it really does. It's similar to or for me anyway, when I'm thinking of like putting these in my cube, it's similar. Like it's a similar mindset to things like conspiracies or like the draft matters cards, which we kind of, if anyone has listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you'll know that I absolutely love, because it adds more magic to your Magic. Like it adds this whole extra level of cool interactions and cool like deck building to your cube. Like it makes the draft more interesting. It makes games more interesting. You have more choices that are interesting, and that's kind of a really fun thing with lessons and learn. Because another way of thinking about cards with lesson and cards that learn is that effectively it's kind of like a 2-card combo. But with like, but it's not kind of the same combo every time. It's kind of like this cool card combines with this cool card, and I think it probably makes sense if we kind of break down some of the options in the 2 different card types. So let's quickly go through the cards that learn. Currently, at time of recording, we've only seen cards with learn from original Strixhaven. I was quite surprised that kind of we've seen lessons come back twice since then in Avatar: The Last Airbender set and Secrets of Strixhaven, but we haven't seen any new learn cards. So we are kind of working with the pool of cards that we've already got. There's about 21 of them from original Strixhaven. If you're listening to this in the future and there has been more sets printed where the learn mechanic has returned, that greatly helps this archetype. It really makes it more viable just having more good cards with learn. Because kind of, as we'll go through, kind of like the learn cards themselves, I'm not going to say they've played it safe, but like with all of these, you have to remind yourself that they have the additional caveat of like at a base level, they have rummage tacked onto them, but also they could be going and just tutoring up a game-winning spell for you when you cast them. That's quite strong as well. So kind of like James, kind of like, what are your favourite cards with learn?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty big range in terms of power level. You've got a few which are just sort of great cards that if they're, even if you just have 1 or 2 things to learn for, it can be really strong. So something like Gnarled Professor is 2 green for a 5/4 trample. When it enters, you learn. So with this, I think a good midpoint, right, is imagine learn was just draw a card instead, right? Like say you've got like 2 good lessons in your sideboard, not much of a learn. Fine, your learn is like drawing you one of those 2 cards each time. You've got a little bit of choice, but nothing huge. Even in that scenario, Gnarled Professor is a really strong card, right? Like 4 mana 5/4 trample, draw a card is really powerful. You only need 1 or 2 good lessons to get it to that level. Because you might have better cards you could draw in your deck, but also it's never hitting your land, so that's like probably a good thing on turn 4. But you also have a bunch of learn cards which really require you to have a little bit more choice in your learn board before they get good. So something like Hunt for Specimens is 1 black for a sorcery, create a 1/1 green pest with when it dies you draw a card and learn. So with this one, if you said, okay, instead of learn we're drawing a card, that's like then a medium card, right? That's like it's an Elvish Visionary, probably a bit worse actually being a sorcery, not a crit. But when you make this into, I have like 4 or 5 powerful lessons in my sideboard, in pretty much every scenario, one of those is going to be good. This is granting me a ton of choices, whether it's on turn 2 or in the late game. It's going to be getting me something good for the situation I'm in right now. Then Hunt for Specimens is a really powerful card. And we've got, even some which look very filler, right? Like Cram Session is 1 and a black-green hybrid mana, gain 4, learn, sorcery. You don't want it if you don't have good choices, but, if that's drawing me a really powerful card and gaining me 4 life to get me a bit of time to cast it, that's great. So yeah, we've got tons of good choices here. We've got some nice interactive ones as well. Divide by 0, for example, 3 mana instant, turn a spell permanent to its owner's hand, learn, really good. Another one I think is way better than it looks, actually, is the Field Trip. This is 2 and a green search your library for basic forest, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, and learn. So 3 mana Rampant Growth, bad Rampant Growth, it only gets the forest. But if you just have one good 5 mana lesson to ramp into, this is like a whole threat wrapped up, an acceleration wrapped up in one card. Actually plays really nicely. So you just have this in your opening hand. That's your turn 3-4. You're setting yourself up really well. So yeah, there's some pretty good choices here. There's some that are good on rate. Some you have to work for a bit more.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think what you generally see with lessons is that so think of your standard draft mechanics, like cards you would standardly see in draft. So like a pump spell, a ramp spell, a blue bounce spell, that kind of stuff. What we generally see is that kind of what they did is they effectively put learn on those type of effects and maybe made them cost one mana. Like the ones that I'm generally kind of I would be okay playing or okay considering are the ones that learn straight away. The card like all the ones James mentioned, you cast a spell and you get to learn. There's cards like Eye Twitch, which is a single black for a 1/1 flyer that it has to die to learn. I'm not here for that. Like if I'm going through the steps of putting this stuff in my deck, it's because I'm going to be putting some powerful lessons in my cube that I want to get straight away. I don't want to have to go through the whole thing of like making this die, like needing a sack outlet or anything like that. Kind of like I want to get my juice straight away, basically. So that's the base level of what I'm looking for from like if I was putting any of these learns or cards with learn in my cube. The other one I want to touch on that does see some cube play already, but for a different reason, is First Day of Class. This sees play in like Pauper and Peasant cubes. It's and does quite well in Pauper as a format. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, put a +1 counter on it, and it gains haste until end of turn, and it has learn. So this is not this can get in a cube as a learn card if you're doing the learn lesson combination, but also if you have any persist creatures, you're about to go infinite. It does the thing that you want from a persist enabler of the creature comes back in with a -1/-1 counter. If you sacked it, this will trigger it and it will null and void it, so you can then combo off. That's it's not a reason like by itself isn't a reason to just include this card, but like it adds some nice additional synergy and kind of like I like cards to overlap. I want cards to go in multiple decks. That is something cool you can do with that. So it's definitely, I think, worth mentioning. But James, are there any other other learn cards that kind of like are worth touching on before we move on?
I think I think most of them fall quite nicely in the bracket that you want, right? Which is powerful if you've built around them and you have a bunch of good lessons to choose from. Not great if you only have 1 or 2, which is kind of nice, right? Because it means that if you're drafting the learn lesson deck, you should see these cards. Theoretically, not a ton of other players are going to want these because they will require a little bit of commitment in the drafting portion. You know, they're not getting there by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you take a card like Pop Quiz, this is the 2 in a blue instant draw a card with learn. If that's in the same pack as like a Ponder, the other blue player in the cube is going to take the Ponder because it's a more efficient spell. But if you're doing something, but if the player is doing something with the lessons, then they're going to want this spell more because it's 3 mana to draw a card and then rummage in blue. Blue can do better than that. But if it's drawing you a specifically good card, and as James has touched on, if it's becoming a tutor, then that's really good. That's where you're getting that extra bit of synergy, you're getting that extra bit of power. So those are some of the learn cards that we have. As we mentioned, there may be more printed in the future. I would not be surprised if there are some printed in the next couple of years. I think one reason why maybe they're playing it not safe but like a bit close to their chest is that it's kind of like Partner in Commander, in that once you start adding more cards, it's like you get so many more like exponential combinations, if that kind of makes sense. If you start printing a bunch of like really powerful cards with learn, it then makes all the lessons exponentially better, if that kind of makes sense. So it's this thing of like I think we will see learn again in the future, but I think the power level will be more comparable with what we've already seen. They're not going to like modern. I don't think that they're going to like modern Horizons learn cards, because effectively, like me and James we're touching on this before the podcast started, but kind of like effectively learn and lessons right now is kind of like in a similar vein, not power level wise, but in a similar vein to like Enter the Dungeon. If they commanderized lesson and learn or modern Horizons it, you would get the initiative, which might be fun for a bit, but then it might be too all encompassing and might be a thing of just like. But it's something they're definitely thinking about when they add, or when they're thinking about adding more learn cards in the future. But with that being said, let's touch on kind of like effectively the payoffs. Like the learn cards are kind of like our vegetables. The lessons are kind of like the cool payoffs for running the learns. James, let's start in the first Strixhaven set. What were the lessons like back then?
Yeah, so this is how sort of Learn Lesson got introduced to the world, right? And it wasn't really a thing in Cube at this point because, frankly, the lessons were not very good in original Strixhaven, power level-wise. I mean, it worked for the draft environment, but you couldn't just transpose it really to a cube because the power level here was pretty low. So you had cards like Introduction to Prophecy. This is 3 colorless mana for Preordain. You had Introduction to Annihilation was the removal spell as a common lesson. This was exile a non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. That's for 5 mana. That's kind of tough. Even going up to rare, the big rare threat was Mascot Exhibition. I mean, it's like 7 mana for you get a 4/4, a 2/1 flyer. It's okay, but
it's a mythic, James. You put some respect on.
I will say that was the literal best card you could open in original Strixhaven because it meant
in limited that card slapped.
Yes, every lesson you had access to it every game, right? Because you had enough learn. So it was really cool for Booster Draft. Didn't really scale up to cube power level because these were just slightly too inefficient, really, for what to justify spending your mana on in most cubes. But one I think is interesting, and that would certainly make it if I was doing Learn Lesson in a cube, is Environmental Sciences. So this is the 2 colorless mana, search library for a basic, put it in your hand, gain 2 life. This doesn't sound like an exciting card, right? We have a Rampant Growth for 2 mana that puts the basic into play. That's way better. But this is colorless, and this is actually a really important piece for a lot of the Learn Lesson decks because you're often going to be a lot of colors, right? You want access to the lessons in multiple colors. You want access to the learn cards in multiple colors. If you're going down this route, splashing often makes sense. And this means that when you're building your mana base, you can kind of count your learn cards in your base colors as sources for your other colors, right? It means that, if your first learn card you draw might have to get the sciences, but that then sets up your fixing for your subsequent learn cards. It's one where sort of in the best draws, this isn't the lesson you get, right? Because in your best draws, you have your mana lined up and you can start getting your gas straight away. But it adds loads of consistency and it turns some dysfunctional draws into okay draws. So actually a really important piece, even though it doesn't look super flashy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I remember this as being an absolute cornerstone of that draft format. Environmental Science is a banger. And then last year, with the Avatar, the Last Airbender set, we got a bunch more lessons. And kind of like the interesting thing with these lessons is that kind of a lot of them were just kind of like effectively functional reprints of good cards we were kind of already playing, or cards that were very close to cards that kind of like we're already seeing play in Cube. James, talk to me about some of the cards that you liked from Avatar, the Last Airbender.
Yeah, this set was a real game changer on the lessons front because it just gave us good cards at a decent rate, that were lessons. So whereas the design approach they had taken in original Strixhaven, right, was these cards can be really inefficient because you're only getting them when you want them, you're only getting them when they're good, and you're getting them kind of for free. So we're going to attack a bunch of extra mana on them. Your Preordain's going to cost you 3 mana. Fine, say Work Draft, not good for Cube. This is where we become interested in Learn Lesson as a cube mechanic, because now our Learn cards are getting us a choice of good on-rate effects. So they just have efficient interaction in here. For example, we've got things like Iroh's Demonstration. This is 1 red for a sorcery lesson. You choose one, deal 1 to each creature your opponents control, or deals 4 damage to target creature. Just super serviceable red removal. We've got things like Seismic Sense. This is green for a lesson. Sorcery, look at the top X cards, where X is the number of lands you control. May reveal a creature or land from among them, put them into your hand, rest on the bottom. So this is nice. You get it early and it's going to dig you to a land or some action, whatever you need. You get it late, it's going to look at a ton of cards. And for just 1 mana. Again, like pretty damn efficient stuff. Even things like Abandon Attachments. This is a Tormenting Voice variant for 1 and a hybrid green and red. Yeah, they're not always like the flashiest thing in the world, but they're giving you a ton of like pretty efficient options.
Well, yeah, Abandoned Attachments is literally an easier to cast Thriller Possibility. Thriller Possibility is almost a card that I would run in my Unpowered Vintage Cube. It's a card that would still be run in a lot of different cubes. But like, you have a card like Shared Roots, 1 and a green, sorcery lesson, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. That is just a functional reprint of Rampant Growth with lesson tacked onto it. I run Rampant Growth in my most powerful cube. It is fine to run Rampant. Like there is no like that's kind of what we're talking about a little bit with this. Is like they have just given us cards that we would already run or consider running in the common and uncommon slot, which just makes this whole deck more viable, as James is saying, because we're not having to run slightly off rate spells. We have on rate spells now that we can build this wish board with, and just make all these learn cards better. Like those learn cards we talked about earlier, the ones that are just slightly not like take Hunt for Specimens. That gets so much better if that's 1 on a black, make a 1/1 pest, and tutor a copy of Rampant Growth to your hand. If you need the ramp in your deck, that's phenomenal. Like, just having that flexibility is like that's way more appealing nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. The other very nice thing, right, is it gave us way more optionality at decent rates, right? Like, there's just a lesson disenchant, for example, in Origin of Metal Bending, I think it's called. Like, sure, it's not the thing you're getting every time, but if you just adding that 1 card to your lesson board, how much of a difference is that going to make when you play against the Artifacts deck? Because if you have like 4 or 5 learn spells in your deck, you have 4 or 5 ways to go and get a disenchant. That means that 1 card in your sideboard, you're going to have access to pretty much every game when you need it. That is going to be huge in some matchups. Similarly, things like there's a black cheap sweeper, like an Infest, Ruinous Waterbending. 1 black. There's an additional cost you can waterbend for. That's like pay 4 mana or tap some stuff. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. You get some life if you waterbend whatever. Not like a super exciting card on its own, but if you play against the Go Wide white tokens deck and you have 5 ways to go and get an Infest out of your sideboard, that's going to make a huge difference to that matchup. So yeah, a lot of what we got here, like it's pretty efficient functional stuff, but it makes our learn package and our learn cards so much more powerful because it's giving us that optionality.
Yeah, exactly. And like one thing Avatar was really good at is as we're saying, the set itself had all these good playable, like functional draft cards that we want for a Magic draft environment. But then there was also the like additional supplemental product. Like I don't think it was a commander set. I think it was like let's say booster fun. But effectively, they gave us some powerful rares in those as well. So like there's a card like Reckless Blaze, 3 red, sorcery lesson, deals 5 damage to each creature. Whenever a creature you control with dealt damage this way dies this turn, add a red. Like that's a very strong card to just be able to tutor up when you need. Like if you cast your learn spell early, you can get your ramp. If you need it late, if you cast it late, you can get a board wipe. That's incredible flexibility to just have available to you at different points of the game. But that kind of does bring us nicely onto like touching on like rares and powerful cards. That brings us onto the most recent set at time of recording, which is Secrets of Strixhaven. And here we got the Paradigm Lessons. James, talk us about these, because these are kind of 5 splashy cards is the best way to say it.
Yeah, they certainly are. And these actually filled a really nice gap in the lesson board we could build for Cube, I think. Because the one thing we didn't really get from Avatar, right, was the big end of the game lessons. And that's exactly what these are. They don't end the game right away, but they give you inevitability because of that paradigm mechanic. So for those who haven't seen it, Paradigm says, then exile this spell. After you first resolve a spell with this name, you may cast a copy from exile without paying its mana cost at the beginning of each of your main phases. So this is kind of like Epic, but without the downside. You're just getting the spell again for free every turn for the rest of the game. Kind of insane, and on any decent spell that's giving you an advantage, that will win a long game, right? So an example of some of these, we've got 1 in each color. So not tons, but they're super high impact. So for example, the green one is Germination Practicium, is how I'm going to say that.
It's better than what I was going to say.
Germination.
Practicum.
Yeah, I think that might be what it is, actually.
Filth, James. Filth.
Filth. Germination filth. And it's 3 green for a sorcery lesson. It says put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature you control, and it has Paradigm. So you're going to do that every turn at the beginning of your main phase for the rest of the game. Essentially, if you have any sort of board that sticks around, this is going to win you the game really, really quickly. Similarly, stuff like Improvisation Capstone, 5 red, so 7 mana. Exile cards top of your library until you exile cards with total mana value of 4 or greater. And you may cast any number of spells from among them without paying their mana costs. Bearing in mind, this isn't, you can hit a 7-drop and still cast it with this effect, right? Or you can hit a 3-drop, then it will keep going, then you exile a 5-drop. So this is a ton of card advantage, a ton of mana every single turn. You will eventually run out of cards. The exiled cards, if you don't cast them, they don't go on the bottom of your deck, so you do have to bear that in mind, but this will win you the game pretty damn quickly. If it doesn't, you kind of built your deck wrong. So, these lessons give us this huge late game inevitability, and just having access to one of these in your sideboard means that basically all of your lessons, all of your learn cards are going to be really good top decks into the late game, because they're all going to give you access to that long game inevitability effect you need.
Yeah, definitely. Like these, the paradigms are awesome because they are the big splashy things that we want to get. Like, it is the top end that we're kind of after. The paradigms, I think, are really cool cards, but I don't think you can just run them in a cube if you don't have lessons, because I'm way more up for them if I have multiple ways of getting them from my deck. Like for me to want to run one of the paradigm cards, I really want 2 or 3 lessons, but once I have that, it means that I'm going to be able to get them every game. And that's really nice. It means it's not just going to be a mythic in my deck that I will see 2 games out of 6 or something like that, or 2 games out of 8. If I have the ability to consistently tutor them, they become way more potent and way more reliable, and I really like that.
Yeah, for sure. If you have a few good learn cards, this can be kind of your late game plan, right? Most of them don't literally win the game on their own, as in you need some other creatures or something. The green one puts counts on stuff, the blue one copies a creature, the white one returns permanents from your graveyard. So you need something else to work with, but really not a lot, right? If you're casting that spell every turn, you don't need tons else to win the game. So yeah, these are, listen, they're all expensive. They're all, they're not always going to catch you up from behind super efficiently. So they maybe wouldn't be cards you would just put in your deck by themselves, but as an option to get with your learn cards later into the game, these are phenomenal.
Awesome. So I think that's kind of a good overview of the types of of the kind of card pool that we're working with when we're thinking of building this as like an archetype or a package. I think it's probably a good point now to kind of touch on like what power level of cube do we think this could see play in? Because Lessons and Learn hasn't made a splash as of yet in the highest power level of cubes, but like, and that's primarily because in things like the Mega Vintage Cube, you can't really run cards that just aren't the most on rate cards possible. If that makes sense, like all the learn, like as we touched on with the learn cards, they're all effects that we want, but they're all like a mana or two more than we would normally want to pay for them. We can't do that in like the most powerful of cubes, but in any slower cube and in any kind of more like what we kind of touched on is like we've spoken about this a few times when we talked about cubes. There's the cubes that are just trying to win as quickly as possible, and then there's the cubes that are trying to do a thing, and there's still a bit of game afterwards. If we're trying to work towards a big paradigm card, like a paradigm card doesn't end the game on the spot. There's some turns afterwards. That's where I kind of see this package working, if that kind of makes sense. So in a cube where if you use the word mid-range to describe it, I think this could see play. In something like my Treat Yourself cube, where I want players to build an engine and do a thing. This is literally building an engine and doing a thing. It seems kind of perfect there. It's something I should definitely look at adding to that in the future. Kind of like, would you go along with that, James? Kind of like from your end, kind of like, where do you see lessons and learn popping up, and kind of what can you do you think as a cube designer to kind of like get the most out of it, and like really like if you want to showcase it, what do you need to do as well to really showcase it?
Yeah, for sure. This isn't one for your high power level cubes, just because of the rates of the cards, right? And you've got to have time to be able to get the engine going, but it's also you're asking your players to jump through quite a lot of hoops, right, to get this going. You're asking them to spend a bunch of draft picks on lessons, which are cards that don't go in their deck. So they need to make sure they still get enough playables and get some learn cards and draw and be able to cast those learn cards to get the lessons going. There are some hoops to jump through here. Like, for that to be worth it, they have to really feel like they're doing it when they get it all working, And if there's a bunch of cards in the cube which are just as powerful as this stuff but don't require the setup, then people are just going to play those cards and ignore the learn lesson stuff. So yeah, you've got to pitch it at the right power level of cube where this actually feels like, for this to actually feel like something that's worth doing from a player's point of view. But yeah, I think if you are in that spot and your cube does give your players some time to set up, then it's kind of an interesting thing to look at,
Yeah, I think another reason why we just haven't seen it up to now is just kind of like there's been plenty of like cool mechanics or archetypes that have been limited to like one set and hasn't really gone for much further. I'm thinking like Mutate from Ikoria. Really cool, but like it's hard to support Mutate in Cube because it only existed on like one set and there's a limited amount of cards. Lesson and Learn has kind of been that. And kind of like the new lessons have really given us the possibility of adding it to a cube. But like I think, yeah, there only being 21 cards with Learn is definitely like a hindrance to how far it can go in terms of power level anyway. Like, would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, in terms of power level, and it is certainly a challenge you need to solve from a cube building point of view, right? it creates the potential for a feel bad if you don't have enough learn cards in the cube, right? Because what you don't want to have happen is people spend a bunch of picks on lessons, only end up with a couple of learn cards, and it kind of feels like, why did I spend 5 picks on building this great lesson board when I only have 2 ways to access it? And you could kind of train wreck your draft a bit doing that, right? I do think there are like ways you can look to address that, but it's certainly a challenge that there's 22. It kind of means you'd probably need to play most of them, and there's a couple in there that aren't great, as we mentioned. Looking at you, iTwitch, and there's one that's like it's a combat trick, like. It's fine. It's things like 3 mana +3/+1 trample to a creature and learn. Like, it's okay, but it's also, your learn deck probably isn't a beatdown deck, It's probably a 5-color soupy deck because you want access to all the different colors, and learn kind of lends itself to that naturally because it can fix your mana. So I kind of don't want to have to run the stupid enthusiastic study, but I don't want to end up having to put this terrible combat trick in my 5-color deck. It doesn't make sense to me. And then if you start cutting too many of the learn cards, then the numbers are really getting kind of sketchy, right?
Yeah, exactly. One thing that is very helpful with the cards like Abandoned Detachments, which is effectively a thriller possibility, and with Shared Roots, which is a rampant growth, is that the nice thing about those cards is that they can, if you draft them, they can still be played in your deck if you don't get the learn cards. That's one way of addressing it. Just if your lessons are playable by themselves, it negates the need of always having to have them be in the sideboard. You can just run these cards in your deck. That is something worth considering as well. That is a nice backup. That they are just Magic cards, you can just run them in your deck. The other part of that as well, James, is the size of the cube. Like, it's very much a thing of, like, once you go apart, like, at a 360 cube, you need less redundancy than a 540. At a 540 cube, you need less redundancy than a 720. I think what we're basically saying is, like, you will struggle more to make lessons and learn work in a 720 cube. A 540 cube might be doable, but I'm feeling like a 360, 20 cards or so, like 18 maybe if we got the bad ones. That seems like 18 lesson cards in a 360 cube. That seems doable to me. That seems like a perfectly solid package.
Yeah, that seems totally fine, right? Because it's not like everyone is going to be trying to do the learn lesson thing. So the learn lesson cards should end up with like 1 or 2 drafters. I think, naturally this lends itself towards being a deck that plays quite a lot of colors. So it should then be pretty easy, where you have 1 to 2 players who end up getting like 5 or 6, maybe even 7 learn cards, and that's great. That's loads. If you go down to 540, it's still manageable if you run like 15, 18 of them. But yeah, you do have to run most of them. 720, it seems really tough. I agree.
No, definitely. And kind of like there are some other things that kind of I've been thinking of that you could do to make it more incentivizing. Is that, like, for example, where we've seen lessons and learn in Strixhaven, that is a spells matter set. If you're pushing spells matters and like spell slingers, like these cards will go great with a VV, that kind of stuff. Like if you have other bits of synergy, other cards that care about you casting instant or sorceries, these become better. Like Mascot Exhibition makes a bunch of tokens. If we can double that or triple that or storm it with a card like Thousand Year Storm, that becomes quite a bit more interesting. It becomes, you get that extra bit of synergy that's quite nice.
Yeah, for sure. Anything that just cares about you casting instants and sorcery spells, because a ton of the learn cards are instants and sorceries, then you're going and getting an instant or sorcery, so you've kind of got 2 triggers wrapped up in 1 card. That's really nice. I think it lends itself, to a bit of that stuff, and a bit, I'd say, more the big instants and sorcery matter decks. It's not really one for like a lean prowess deck, I would say, because it's more of a card advantage mechanic than a tempo mechanic in general. And it's also just pushing you towards playing a lot of colors, which again is sort of leaning you away from that aggressive prowess mode and more towards the let's cast something giant mode. Because you will end up, you're not necessarily going to get your, 5 really good lessons and 5 really good learn cards all in 2 colors. So I think it will push you towards splashing, but the lessons give you really good tools to splash, so that should be fine. But yeah, it is pushing you very much towards that bigger deck, right? Also, because the lessons you're going to end up playing and they're going to be best are kind of the more late game ones a lot of the time. Not necessarily just the big expensive ones, but also the interactive ones. But it is a thing with lessons that, if you consider something like the Rampant Growth lesson, yes, it's good because it's fixing, but Rampant Growth is a card that is best on turn 2. You're basically never casting it on turn 2, right? Because there just aren't really 1-mana learn cards you're going to play very much. Like, sure, you could cast an Eye Twitch on turn 1 and they lightning bolt it, but it doesn't seem like a
right into your plan, James.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a super realistic scenario. Yeah, so kind of if I was thinking about trying to put Learn Lesson into a cube, how I could imagine trying to do it would be I have a bunch of 2-color archetypes, and then Learn Lesson is kind of a 5-color option. The like spicy 5-color deck can knit stuff together a little bit. I think that could be quite cool. And obviously, not to say you're going to be literally 5 colors every time you draft it, but it's the multicolor option. I wouldn't limit it to just 1 or 2 colors because then you're not going to have enough cards, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. It definitely seems like a teamer-ish, like at least 2 splashing a 3rd color adjacent deck. But that's where cards like Environmental Sciences, as we've mentioned earlier, and also I guess Aang's Journey, which is a similar type of effect to Environmental Sciences. Aang's Journey, 2 generic sorcery lesson with kicker for 2. Search your library for a basic land card. If the spell was kicked instead, search your library for a basic land card and a shrine card. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle, and you gain 2 life. So it's actually a functional Environmental Sciences. Just having multiple of those colorless effects as the first thing you go and get is quite nice.
Yeah, it is really disappointingly strictly better, but Environmental Sciences is still cooler.
Shrine synergy, baby. Let's go. What's the best thing you can get with that Shrine Tutor? Because is Shrine a creature type?
Oh, you want? No, it's enchantment.
No, it's enchantment type. No, we can't. Boo.
I don't think you can get changelings with.
Boo. No, we can't. Okay. It's like they thought about that. Damn it. But yeah, either way, yeah. Just having multiple of those colorless, go get your next land drop seem very good. But yeah, awesome. I think the final thing I kind of want to touch on is one thing we also saw in Avatar, and we'll probably see again in the future, is cards that incentivize us for running lessons that aren't necessarily learn cards. James, talk to me about cards like Gran and like Iroha Grand Lotus.
Yeah, so some of these will be quite familiar to anyone who's played Standard in the last 6 months. Is it lessons being a very powerful deck there? So Gran, for example, commonly known as Ragagran, I believe.
I didn't know that. Yeah. That's very good. Well done, Magic players.
Gran is a single blue mana for 1/2 legendary creature human peasant ally, apparently. It says whenever Gran becomes tapped, you draw a card, then discard a card, and non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast as long as there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard. So this was a common bit of text in that Avatar set, was having 3 lessons in your graveyard to get a payoff. So one of the best payoffs here is Accumulate Wisdom, which is 1 blue instant lesson. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, the rest on the bottom, so an Anticipate. But if you have 3 or more lessons in your graveyard, then you put all 3 of them in your hand. So just a straight up 2 mana draw 3, yeah.
That's actually quite good.
Really
that's
powerful.
Very strong.
Yeah. So this works both as a lesson to go and tutor for, right? If quite late in the game, you might have learned a couple of other times, cast a couple of other lessons, and then your third learn could go and get this. You have some lessons in your graveyard already, and you can draw 3. Or it could also push you to just put some lessons in your deck, because then you get them into your graveyard earlier, and you can get this online earlier. So kind of works quite nicely either way. Also, something like Iroh Grand Lotus is a really nice sort of later game payoff for this stuff. This is 3 in a teamer, so 6 mana total, 5/5, firebending 2. During your turn, each non-lesson, instant, and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. Flashback equal to its mana cost, but your lessons have flashback for a single mana. So if you have a bunch of lessons in your graveyard, you play this, you can then just cast your lessons for a single mana. You can go pretty hard for this card. Also, like, not completely terrible if you don't have tons of lessons in your yard, right? Because it does flashback your other stuff. So yeah, this is cool in that it gives you some more things to do with your lessons outside of just learning for them. You might end up, if you have enough of this stuff, you could maybe put some of your lessons in your main deck and some in your sideboard to learn for, and just so you get those lessons in your graveyard a little bit quicker.
Nice, yeah. I think that's actually a really nice way of taking it. Like if it can make a splash in standard without any learn cards, and that's really nice. I'm just looking at that standard deck. A card like Combustible Technique seems quite good in this kind of build as well, where you're just trying to run as many lessons as possible. 1 and a red instant lesson. It deals damage equal to 2 plus the number of lesson cards in your graveyard to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So it goes nicely with just having more lessons. Like it could become quite a decent removal spell. Again, just rewarding you for having more of them, and that's actually quite a nice, way of getting bonus synergy. Basically, it's not just the learn cards where you're getting synergy from. If the lesson cards are now playing into each other and rewarding you for having more of them, then that's really nice. It means you're not going to be as ruined if you don't see the learn cards. Basically, you can still build it and still have redundancy that way.
Exactly. Yeah, I think for me, this is the approach I would take to try and not get around, but to compensate for the fact that we can't put like 30 learn cards in the cube. Is you make the lessons interesting, both whether or not you have a bunch of good learn stuff, and players might put some in their main, some in their board. They might put all in their board to learn for. They might decide they don't care about the learn stuff and just put them all in their main because they have some cool payoffs for it. And I think all of those things are interesting. I actually kind of like it sometimes when there's a little bit of tension in the deck building like that. I think that can make it quite interesting too. I quite like some of these payoffs. I think they're pretty good.
Nice, yeah, I'm definitely here for those. They seem quite fun. And also, I just love the fact that a card called Gran is wrecking standard. Maybe Universes Beyond isn't so bad after all.
Yeah, you can't be mad about it. Even the most ardent Universes Beyond hater can't be mad at Gran, can they?
Yeah, I do feel like I've learned a lot today, James. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't get booed. All right, I'll take it. Right, yeah. But that's going to do it for today.
That was kind of too bad to boo, honestly. Yeah. It was like... that would be kicking a man when he's down to do that. Like,
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. But I thought that was I thought that was a really good conversation. And it's definitely something that I want. It's definitely something I want to try at some point. I think everything we've gone over, the combination of getting the learn cards that are good and like playable in your cubes, stuff like the Null Professor, combining that with cards like Accumulated Wisdom, like that's my main. Like I did not see this card before. I have missed this one completely. But just a card that rewards you for a number of lessons, when that's combined with just playable lessons like the Rampant Growth and the Thriller Possibility that we touched on, that becomes that's doable. That is a testable package. That's really nice, and kind of it can be a light touch, or you can really go into it by cramming as many cards with learns as you think you can run, and then just all the good payoffs for it in the lessons. I think it could be a lot of fun in the right cube.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to experiment with. I'm quite excited to see it in some cubes, you know. I think it's got to be the right cube for it. You can't have the power level too much through the roof. You've got to give it a little bit of time to get going. But I think it could be really sweet.
Awesome. That's where we're going to leave it for today. James, pleasure, man. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Nice one. All right, just leaves me to thank you all very much for listening. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give the podcast a 5-star review. Tell a friend, especially telling a friend. That's actually the main way we get more viewers, so that would really help us out. If you're in a cube group, tell the other 7 people, please.
Literally open WhatsApp right now. The link is available.
Do it. Do it now. The main thing is, thank you for listening. We do really appreciate you all being here. Until next week, goodbye from me, goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.